You probably know me as Paris Kaufman, the author of these books right here. My debut novel was titled The Magi, and that is what my writing is known for as starting at. But I actually had very, very humble beginnings as a writer. I would go so far as to say devastating beginnings as a writer, because the first book I ever wrote, it fell in a sewer. It was titled Bob and Sally, and I wrote it with a pencil on green construction paper that I had cut into smaller sheets about this big, maybe even smaller than that, and stapled it back together. That is what Bob and Sally look like. I wrote it, I illustrated it, I produced it, I printed it, on my homemade scissor cutting press, and I put that book together. And give myself some credit here, it was pretty good, or at least my younger brother thought it was good. The story followed this couple who were going on a picnic together that went disastrously wrong. If I'm remembering correctly, there was a scene where somebody threw a frisbee and it actually fell on Bob's birthday cake and completely covered both of them in frosting. That's the kind of story that was going on there. Like I said, I dropped it in a sewer. My brother and I enjoyed that book for about 3 days. We read it several times, and may it rest in peace. Okay. It wasn't technically a sewer, but it was actually more devastating than a sewer because it was technically salvageable, but not without destroying our house. So I don't even know how to describe this because you would really have to see it to know what I'm talking about. But we had this porch, and our porch had a glass window, and then it had a skinny frame that went inside a plastic covering. And I actually technically dropped the book in between the plastic covering and the door, and it whoop all the way down. Could never have recovered it without completely destroying the door and needing to get an entirely new door for our porch. So yeah, technically not a sewer, but honestly, I wish it had been a sewer because then it would have been gone for good. Instead, the book was perfectly intact. And you know what? The new owners of that house might just have a great story to read. When it first fell, I ran back upstairs to my room. I got yellow construction paper and I rewrote the story, but unfortunately, it was just never as good. So that really isn't truly the end of Bob and Sally. But I will tell you this, I learned some valuable lessons. And it leads for a funny story now, so it really is a win-win, even though Bob and Sally will be dearly missed. That was the first time I ever made somebody happy with my writing. I wrote the Bob and Sally when I was about 7 or 8, which would have made my brother 4, maybe 5. And the two of us sat down together and I read him the story and he found it hilarious. And I also enjoyed the story, but even more than that, I enjoyed the story with him. It was the first time I ever made somebody happy with my writing. It was the first time I ever made somebody laugh with my writing. And that is exactly why I still write today. The reason I started publishing my works is I had the goal, I had the dream of making just one person as happy with my writing and my books as I was with my favorite books growing up. I was a huge bookworm. My books, my reading, it was my life. I read and reread my favorite books over and over, and I would love to have just one person have that same level of love for my books. So that is why I publish, and my dream, my goal of that traces back to the somewhat devastating story of Bob and Sally. I also learned a very valuable lesson with Bob and Sally. Always, always, always keep multiple copies of your work. That is particularly if you are going to be carrying your work over sewers or by porch doors. Make sure you have an extra copy already made, because if you are going to drop your book, you're going to be pretty devastated when you don't have a backup version of it. So, learn from my mistakes. Be careful around sewers, be careful around porch doors, and please keep backup copies. Losing the story was not all devastating news and hard lessons, because I actually mentioned Bob and Sally in my college application essay, and I got accepted into my top school. Now, I'll be honest, I do not think that was the deciding factor when it came to accepting me. I am majoring in the business mathematics field, not writing. But I think it goes to show that I'm willing to learn lessons out of everything. Clearly, that didn't scare them off because I got in. Bob and Sally. First book I ever wrote that, yeah, it's maybe somebody else can find it and enjoy it one day. If you want to tear my house apart that I grew up in, by all means, go ahead. Let me know. I will autograph it for you. I will get you hooked up with all of the Bob and Sally merch that does not exist because the story no longer exists. But other than that, thank you for listening. I hope you can learn from the lessons that 7-year-old Paris learned, and I hope that maybe, just maybe, Bob and Sally are still able to make people laugh even after their devastating death in the doorframe. Thank you for watching. Do not forget to subscribe, and whatever time it is, morning, evening, or night, have a great day.